why did Jesus die? And more importantly, why didn't he stay dead? Of course, one answer we could give to the question of Jesus' death is that he died because he was a political insurrectionist and Rome considered him subversive. But that doesn't explain why he didn't stay dead. Of course, some people have argued that Jesus was only mostly dead, but that's not the answer that Mark gives us. In fact, in Mark's gospel, Jesus is quite plainly heading to Jerusalem in the knowledge that he will suffer and die there. In fact, when Peter tries to dissuade him, Jesus rebukes him in the strongest terms possible.
Get behind me, Satan, for you are setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things.
Jesus isn't merely insulting Peter. Rather, he's reflecting the conviction that his true enemy, the true opponent to the coming of God's kingdom on earth, to the fulfillment of the covenant relationship with Israel, the true enemy isn't Peter, it's not the Jewish religious authorities, it's not even Rome. The real enemy is Satan. So who is Satan? In Israel's scriptures, Satan appears, no joke, as a prosecuting attorney whose job it is to accuse humankind for its sinfulness before God. Now, by Jesus' day, the picture of Satan had kind of expanded to encompass this malevolent figure resolutely opposed to God's authority. While not absolving humankind of responsibility, the existence of Satan pointed to the existence of cosmic evil in the world, of an entrenched, pervasive evil. And Satan was understood to possess his own limited authority, and one of the manifestations of that authority was the phenomenon of demon possession. From the opening chapters of Mark's Gospel, Jesus seems bent on casting out demons. Why? We gain an important clue if we take a look at his controversy with the religious authorities, who claim that he is doing these exorcisms with the help of Beelzebul, the prince of demons.
And the scribes who came down from Jerusalem said, "He has Beelzebul, and by the ruler of the demons he casts out demons."
Jesus responds that the very idea of Satan being involved in casting out demons is a little bit like robbing your own house. It's absurd. No, he says, if you want to rob someone's house, first of all, you have to tie up the owner. The implication is that Jesus has tied up Satan and is robbing him blind. Jesus is, in other words, as we used to say on the playground, kicking ass and taking names. There are two important dimensions of Jesus' conflict with Satan in Mark's Gospel. The first is that it indicates, along with Jesus' cryptic teaching, his healing, his forgiveness, it indicates that God's kingdom is now here. So no longer will people be bound and crippled by demonic possession any longer. Second, Jesus' conflict with Satan indicates that the real opponent to God's kingdom is not the Jewish religious authorities or Rome, even though they oppose Jesus in different ways. The real enemy is larger than both of these. The real enemy is the cosmic evil that has infected God's creation as a result of human rebellion, and this evil is embodied in the figure of Satan. And this is why, in order to address the problem of evil, to restore the goodness of creation, to renew the covenant, to deliver Israel through a new Exodus, in other words, in order for God's kingdom to be inaugurated, it's not simply the case that Rome must be defeated. So remember the two horns of God's dilemma. God must be faithful to Israel, and God must address the problem of evil in the world. And this dilemma will not be resolved simply through a political revolution in which Rome is conquered. Rather, the enemy that must be conquered in order for God's kingdom to be established, that enemy is evil itself, the death that has infected God's creation since the rebellion of the first humans. Let me conclude now by reflecting on Jesus' Last Supper with his disciples which was most certainly a Passover Seder. Now, recall the significance of the festival of Passover for the Jews. It was a meal that remembered the Exodus, God's faithful deliverance of Israel from slavery in Egypt, God's bringing of Israel to Sinai and giving them the Torah, and the timing of Jesus' last meal in Jerusalem to coincide with this festival is no coincidence. Indeed, God's faithfulness to the covenant is foremost in Jesus' mind as he celebrates the Passover Seder with his disciples.
While they were eating, he took a loaf of bread, and after blessing it, he broke it, gave it to them, and said, "Take, this is my body." Then he took a cup, and after giving thanks, he gave it to them, and all of them drank from it. He said to them, "This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many. Truly, I tell you, I will never again drink of the fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it new in the kingdom of God."
So what is the blood of the covenant that Jesus refers to? Well, at various points in its history, Israel celebrated what we can call covenant renewal ceremonies. Ceremonies whose purpose was to remind Israel of its sacred vocation to be God's covenant people. And the first of these ceremonies takes place shortly after God gave Israel the Torah on Mount Sinai following the Exodus from Egypt. At the close of the ceremony, Moses takes the blood of a slaughtered ox and sprinkles it over the people, and this act signifies their willing obedience to the covenant. And as Jesus anticipates his impending death, he sees his own shed blood as fulfilling the same purpose, drawing Israel back into covenant fidelity with God. And yet, this covenant sacrifice will not simply restore Israel to relationship with God, for as Mark writes, this blood will be poured out for many. And here I think we can hear the echo of God's covenant with Abraham.
"I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you, and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed."
And thus we come to the unexpected conclusion of Mark's gospel. Jesus' death is not that of a failed political revolutionary. His death rather is the covenant sacrifice destined to bring not only Israel, but the whole human family back into God's family. This then is Mark's new Exodus, the coming of God's kingdom on earth, the renewal and restoration and climax of the covenant relationship with Israel. It's God's plan to address the radical problem of evil and restore the goodness to creation.